The curved projection dome of Lecture Hall 12B flickered with holographic displays of exobiology schematics. 58 students from 17 different species stared in rapt attention as the three-dimensional model of a Tyrannonian apex predator rotated above the central podium. The creature's segmented exoskeleton gleamed under the artificial light, its massive sensory tentacles swaying with algorithmic precision, its 3 rows of serrated dental plates opening and closing in a silent, eternal hunger. Dr. Selene Maris smiled as she watched her students' reactions. Some leaned forward, fascinated. Others recoiled slightly, instinct overriding intellect. A few of the more predatory species in the classroom showed signs of competitive assessment, pupils dilating, breathing patterns shifting, all perfectly normal responses to studying one of the most efficient killing machines the galaxy had ever produced. The Tyrannonian Apex class, Selene continued, her voice clear and confident in the acoustically perfect lecture hall, represents perhaps the ultimate expression of evolutionary adaptation in what we classify as Deathworld environments. Notice the thermal regulation chambers along the ventral spine. She tapped her control panel, and the hologram's outer layer became transparent, revealing intricate internal organs pulsing with simulated life. These specialized heat sinks allow the organism to function in temperature variations of over 200 degrees. Combined with their ability to enter a hibernative state lasting up to 7 standard years, this makes Tyrannonians capable of surviving catastrophic climate shifts that would eliminate most other species. The Interstellar Academy of Exobiology floated serenely in its orbital station around Saturn's moon Mimas. From the expansive viewport windows that lined one wall of the lecture hall, students could see the magnificent rings of Saturn stretching across the starfield, a constant reminder of the vastness they studied. The Academy itself was a marvel of 25th century engineering, a self-contained ecosystem housed within a rotating torus to provide artificial gravity. Populated by the brightest xenobiological minds in known space. The year was 2437, and humanity had spread throughout the solar system and beyond, establishing contact with dozens of alien civilizations. Yet, despite all the diplomatic relations and cultural exchanges, one fact remained constant across all sentient species. Some worlds were simply hellish. Death worlds, they were called, planets with environmental conditions so extreme, predators so lethal, or atmospheric compositions so toxic that they represented the absolute frontier of survivability. And Selene Maris was one of the leading experts on these worlds, despite being one of the Academy's youngest faculty members at 34. Her passion for death worlds had earned her both respect and concern from her colleagues. Some whispered that she was too fascinated by the monsters she studied, too eager to understand their killing methods. But her students adored her, and her research had saved countless lives on frontier exploration missions. "Now," she said, tapping her control panel again, "I want to discuss the hunting methodology. Tyrannonians don't simply chase prey. They're ambush predators with problem-solving capabilities that rival some sentient species. They assess, plan, and execute with a precision that—" A soft chime interrupted her. Selene frowned. The lecture hall's environmental systems were signaling an anomaly. A quick glance at her datapad showed an unexpected heat signature moving among the back rows of the amphitheater-style seating. Probably just a malfunctioning climate regulator, she thought. The maintenance team had been updating the environmental controls all week. She made a mental note to report it after class and continued. "As I was saying, Tyrannonian hunting patterns demonstrate remarkable strategic thinking. They've been observed creating deliberate disturbances to separate prey from groups, using terrain features for concealment, and even constructing rudimentary traps using available materials. She enlarged the hologram's formidable claws and retractable tendrils. These appendages can extend up to 3 meters in adult specimens. The chemical receptors along the tendril surfaces are sensitive enough to detect prey biochemistry from a distance of 50 meters, even through solid barriers. A hand rose from the middle of the classroom. Selene nodded to a blue-skinned Arcturian exchange student. Yes, Varun. Dr. Maris, I've read your paper on the Ceresian-Tyrannonian conflict of 2398. You mentioned there was evidence that Tyrannonians could mask their own biological signatures to avoid the Ceresian scanning technology. How is that possible, given their significant body mass and heat output? Selene smiled. It was an excellent question that cut to the heart of what made these creatures so remarkable. The Tyrannonian chromatophore system doesn't just allow for visual camouflage. She explained. The subcutaneous layer contains specialized cells that can temporarily absorb and store thermal energy, essentially creating a heat sink that renders them invisible to standard thermal scanning for periods of up to 17 minutes. It's one of the adaptations that made the Ceresian mining colony disaster so catastrophic. Their security systems simply couldn't detect the creatures until they were already inside the habitat domes. As she spoke, the environmental alert chimed again, more insistently this time. Selene glanced at her datapad with growing concern. The anomalous heat signature had disappeared completely, only to reappear near the front of the classroom. That wasn't consistent with a climate control malfunction. She tapped a discrete command to alert campus security, then continued her lecture while scanning the room carefully. The students seemed oblivious to any disturbance, their attention still focused on the holographic monster floating above them. "Let's examine the digestive system," she said, keeping her voice steady as she rotated the display. Tyrannonians possess a quad-chambered stomach capable of processing virtually any organic matter. More impressively, they can extract nutrients from materials most species would consider completely indigestible, including certain polymers and synthetic fabrics. Her datapad vibrated with a message from Lieutenant Rajak, head of Academy Security. Deploying scan drones to 12B, maintain normal operations. Do not alarm students. Selene felt a chill run through her as she replied with a simple acknowledgement. Whatever was happening, security was taking it seriously enough to deploy drones during an active class session, something that violated standard academy protocols. The metabolic efficiency of these creatures is unparalleled, she continued, fighting to keep her voice casual. A single feeding can sustain a mature Tyrannonian for up to 3 standard months. This allows them to... The lecture hall doors slid open silently, and 3 small, disc-shaped drones glided in, their sensor arrays pulsing with subtle blue light. Several students turned to watch as the drones began systematically moving through the room, scanning each section. It allows them to survive extended periods in resource-scarce environments. Selene finished, then added smoothly, "Security is conducting a routine environmental assessment. Please pay them no mind and focus on the material." She enlarged the holographic display, hoping to recapture her students' attention. Let's move on to reproductive cycles, which present some fascinating adaptations to catastrophic environment shifts. But the drone's presence had disrupted the classroom atmosphere. Students whispered to one another, some looking concerned. A Terran student near the front raised her hand. "Dr. Maris, is this about the temperature fluctuations? My environmental suit has been registering irregular heat patterns for the past 20 minutes. Before Selene could respond, one of the drones emitted a sharp, pulsing tone, an automated alert signal. It hovered near an empty seat in the 3rd row, its sensors flashing from blue to urgent red. Then, as security personnel appeared at the doorway, the drone suddenly went dark and dropped to the floor with a clatter. Murmurs of alarm spread through the classroom. Celine saw fear beginning to take hold and knew she needed to maintain control of the situation. "Everyone remain calm," she said firmly. "We're experiencing some technical difficulties with the security systems. Lieutenant Rajak, perhaps you could explain the situation to my students." A tall, copper-skinned man in the gray and blue uniform of Academy security stepped forward, his expression professionally neutral, despite the tension evident in his posture. "We're investigating an anomalous reading that may indicate a systems malfunction," he said. "As a precaution, we'd like to scan the room thoroughly. Dr. Maris, if you could continue your lecture while we work." Celine nodded, understanding the unspoken message. Whatever they suspected was in the room. They didn't want to trigger a panic. "Of course," she said, then turned back to her students. "As I was explaining, the reproductive cycle of Tyranonians is triggered by environmental stress rather than regular seasonal patterns. When resources become scarce or conditions worsen, they—" A loud crashing sound from the back of the lecture hall cut her off. All heads turned to see another drone lying in pieces on the floor, smoke curling from its shattered sensor array. Lieutenant Rajak's hand moved to the stunner at his hip. "Everyone stay in your seats," he ordered sharply. 2 more security officers entered, weapons drawn. "Dr. Maris," Rajak said quietly, moving beside her. "We're registering an organic heat signature that matches non-humanoid patterns. It's moving throughout the room, but our sensors can't maintain a lock. The pattern is consistent with some of the adaptive predators in the Academy database." Celine felt her heart rate accelerate as the implications became clear. "Are you saying there's a Deathworld organism loose in my classroom? We can't confirm species, but something is here that shouldn't be. The thermal pattern keeps vanishing, then reappearing elsewhere, almost as if it can mask its thermal signature." Celine finished, her blood running cold. Her eyes darted to the rotating hologram of the Tyrannonian predator, then back to the seemingly normal classroom. "That's impossible. The containment protocols for live specimens are absolute. Nothing could have—" "Doctor," Rajak interrupted, his voice low and urgent. "We need to evacuate the students immediately." Celine nodded, then faced her class. "Everyone, we need to leave the lecture hall in an orderly fashion. Security will direct you to—" She never finished the sentence. A piercing alarm sounded as all the lights in the lecture hall suddenly shifted to emergency red. Students gasped, and some rose from their seats in confusion and fear. "Biohazard containment protocol initiated," announced the Academy's central AI system. "All personnel remain in place. Sealed lockdown in 60 seconds. "Override!" Rajak shouted. "Security authorization, Rajak 7, Delta 9. Override denied. Hostile organism detected. Containment priority, Alpha." Panic erupted. Students began pushing toward the exits, only to find them sealing automatically as the containment protocol engaged. Rajak and his officers tried to maintain order, but the chaos was spreading. Celine's mind raced. If there truly was a Tyrannonian or similar Deathworld predator in the room, mass panic was exactly what would trigger a hunting response. They needed to regain control immediately. She slammed her hand down on the emergency override of her teaching console, triggering a sound burst at a frequency designed to capture immediate attention. The sharp tone cut through the noise, momentarily stunning everyone into silence. "Listen carefully," she said into the sudden quiet, her voice steady despite her fear. "If there is indeed a Deathworld organism in this room, your panicked movement is making you targets. Sit down, remain still, and follow instructions precisely. To her relief, the students began complying, their terror of the unknown predator overriding their instinct to flee. As they settled, Selene turned to Rajak. "We need to locate it before the containment protocol fully engages. Once the room is sealed, we'll be trapped in here with it." Rajak nodded grimly. "The remaining drones are continuing to scan, but if it can mask its signature as you suggested—" "There are other ways to detect it," Selene said, her academic mind engaging despite the danger. Tyrannonians and similar apex predators from extreme environments have distinct movement patterns and physiological tells. She accessed the lecture hall's main environmental controls through her teaching console, overriding the automated systems. "I'm going to adjust the atmospheric composition and temperature gradient in the room," she explained to Rajak. "Most Deathworld predators are hypersensitive to environmental changes. If there's something here, this should force it to react." She began manipulating the controls, creating a subtle but rapidly shifting pattern of temperature zones throughout the lecture hall. Cold air began flowing from some vents, while others emitted warmer currents, creating invisible rivers of temperature variation across the room. "What am I looking for?" Rajak asked, his eyes scanning the seemingly empty spaces between the seated students. "Any unusual air current disruption, any shadow that moves against the flow, any surface that seems to ripple or distort," Selene replied, her own gaze moving methodically across the room. Deathworld predators can camouflage visually and mask their thermal signatures, but they can't become completely invisible. Their physical mass still displaces air and light. The lecture hall had fallen into a tense silence, broken only by the soft hum of the environmental systems and the occasional whir of the remaining security drones. Students sat rigidly in their seats, many clutching personal defense items or pressing close to friends. The holographic Tyrannonian predator continued to rotate serenely above the podium, its simulated tendrils waving in silent menace, a digital ghost mocking their fear of its very real counterpart. Varun, the Arcturian exchange student who had asked about thermal masking earlier, suddenly raised his hand tentatively. "Dr. Maris," he whispered, "the floor near the demonstration table. I think I saw something move." All eyes turned toward the front of the lecture hall, where a large metal table stood laden with physical specimens and laboratory equipment. For a moment, nothing seemed amiss. Then Selene saw it, a subtle distortion of light around the table's edge, like heat waves rising from sun-baked pavement. "There," she breathed. Rajak signaled to his officers, who began moving slowly toward the demonstration table. Stunners raised. The distortion remained still, almost imperceptible unless you knew exactly where to look. "Approach from multiple angles," Selene advised quietly. "If it is a Tyrannonian, it will have nearly 360-degree sensory awareness." The security officers spread out, creating a loose semicircle around the table. One of them activated an advanced scanning device, its blue beam sweeping across the area. "I'm getting intermittent readings," the officer reported. "Something's there, but the scanner can't lock on long enough to identify." Without warning, the distortion by the table surged upward, transforming in an instant from a subtle visual anomaly to a massive, segmented form. Students screamed as the creature fully materialized, a nightmare brought to life. It was a Tyrannonian, almost identical to the holographic model still rotating above the podium, but where the hologram was clean and idealized. This was a creature of terrifying reality, scarred exoskeleton, pulsing respiratory chambers, and sensory tentacles that whipped through the air, tasting the fear that now saturated the room. Rajak and his officers fired their stunners simultaneously. Energy pulses struck the creature's armored hide, causing it to emit a high-pitched screech that sent several students covering their ears in pain. But instead of collapsing, the Tyrannonian seemed merely agitated by the assault. It reared up to its full height, nearly 3 meters tall, and unfurled additional tentacles from concealed segments in its thorax. "Standard stunners won't penetrate that exoskeleton," Celine shouted. "Target the sensory organs at the base of the tentacles." But before the security team could adjust their aim, the creature moved with shocking speed. One massive clawed limb swept across the demonstration table, sending equipment flying toward the officers. In the same fluid motion, it leapt over the table entirely, landing among the front row of students who scattered in terror. Chaos erupted once more. Students climbed over seats to escape, while security officers tried to get clear shots without endangering the civilians. The Tyrannonian thrashed among the seats, its tentacles whipping out to snare anything that moved. A young Terran student stumbled and fell directly in the creature's path. The Tyrannonian's sensory appendages locked onto the prone figure, and it lunged forward, jaws distending. Without thinking, Celine grabbed a specimen canister from her podium, a pressurized container of cryogenic preservative, and hurled it at the creature. The canister struck one of the Tyrannonian's primary sensory clusters and burst open, spraying supercooled liquid across its forward segments. The predator recoiled with a shriek, its affected tentacles instantly stiffening from the rapid temperature drop. The Terran student scrambled away as Rajak pulled her to safety. Celine's academic mind was now running in parallel with her survival instincts. Even as she sought escape routes for her students, she was analyzing the creature's reactions, noting the way its chromatophores pulsed with agitation, how its thermal masking seemed to falter when directly challenged. "It's a juvenile," she called to Rajak. "The proportions are wrong for a full adult. That's why your stunners had some effect. The exoskeleton hasn't fully hardened." "That's fascinating, Doctor," Rajak replied tersely. "But how do we kill it?" "We don't need to kill it," Celine said, her eyes fixed on the creature as it recovered from the cryogenic spray. "We need to incapacitate it long enough to secure proper containment." Her mind raced through everything she knew about Tyrannonian physiology. The juvenile status changed the equation significantly. Adults could withstand almost any environmental extreme, but juveniles— "The environmental controls," she said suddenly. "Juveniles can't regulate their body temperature as efficiently. If we create an extreme enough heat differential, we might be able to force it into torpor." Rajak nodded to one of his officers, who immediately moved toward an environmental control panel on the wall. But the Tyrannonian seemed to sense their intentions. It charged toward the officer, moving with that uncanny speed that made its species such effective hunters. "Distract it!" Celine shouted. Varun, the Arcturian student, acted with remarkable presence of mind. He activated his personal communication device at maximum volume, creating a piercing electronic shriek. The Tyrannonian halted its charge, its sensory tentacles recoiling from the sound. That brief pause was enough. The security officer reached the environmental panel and began the override sequence Celine had indicated. Immediately, warning lights flashed as the lecture hall's climate system prepared for settings well outside normal parameters. "Everyone move to the center of the room," Rajak ordered. "Away from the walls." Students and faculty crowded together as the outer ring of the lecture hall began to glow with sudden heat. The temperature at the perimeter of the room soared to over 70 degrees Celsius, while the center where the humans and aliens huddled dropped rapidly toward freezing. The Tyrannonian shrieked in confusion as its environment transformed into a thermal nightmare. It darted first toward the heat, then away from it, its natural adaptations struggling to cope with the artificial extremes. Its movements became increasingly erratic as its body fought to maintain homeostasis. "It's working," Selene whispered, watching the creature's chromatophores flash in patterns of distress. "Its regulatory system is overloading." The Tyrannonian made one final, desperate lunge toward the huddled group. Rajak and his officers fired their stunners again, this time targeting the now exposed sensory clusters that Selene had identified. The combined assault of thermal extremes and focused energy weapons finally overcame the creature's formidable resilience. It collapsed to the floor, its exoskeleton clicking and contracting as emergency hibernation protocols engaged. For a moment, no one moved. The Tyrannonian lay motionless, its respirator chambers pulsing slowly, its tentacles curled inward in a defensive posture. "Is it dead?" someone whispered. "No," Selene replied, cautiously approaching the fallen predator. "It's entered emergency hibernation to protect its vital systems. This is actually a perfect opportunity to observe the process. Notice how the exoskeleton segments have tightened to create a moisture seal? And the chromatophores are now cycling through a sustained pattern that—" "Dr. Maris," Rajak interrupted with a hint of exasperation. "Perhaps the scientific observations could wait until after we've secured the creature and ensured everyone's safety." Selene blinked, suddenly aware of the room full of traumatized students staring at her in disbelief. Her scientific curiosity had momentarily overridden her awareness of the situation's gravity. "Yes, of course," she said quickly. "Lieutenant, what's the containment protocol for this scenario?" Before Rajak could answer, the lecture hall doors slid open to reveal Academy Headmistress Astrid Vila, flanked by a full tactical security team equipped with heavy containment gear. The tall, silver-haired woman surveyed the scene with an expression of controlled fury. "Dr. Maris," she said icily, "would you care to explain why there is a Class Alpha prohibited organism in your lecture hall?" "Headmistress, I assure you, I had no knowledge of—" "We'll discuss this later." Vila cut her off, gesturing to the tactical team. "Secure the specimen and prepare it for transfer to maximum containment. Lieutenant Rajak, organize medical evaluation for all students and staff present." As the tactical team moved in with specialized equipment to encapsulate the hibernating Tyrannonian, Selene couldn't help but continue her observations. They applied cryogenic restraints with impressive efficiency, their movements suggesting they'd trained specifically for Deathworld organism containment. Interesting, she thought, since such training wasn't standard Academy protocol. "Dr. Maris," Vila said, drawing her attention away from the containment procedure. "A word in private." Selene followed the headmistress to a corner of the lecture hall, aware of the stunned and frightened students being led out by medical personnel. She felt a pang of guilt. Her fascination with the creature had momentarily overshadowed her concern for their well-being. "How did a live Tyrannonian specimen get into my classroom?" she asked before Vila could speak. The headmistress's expression tightened. "That's precisely what I was going to ask you. Doctor, the Academy has no authorized Tyrannonian specimens, live or preserved. The species is classified as absolute containment, required under interstellar biological safety protocols." "I'm aware of the classification," Selene replied, frowning, "which is why I've only ever used holographic models and genetic samples in my research. This creature shouldn't exist outside its homeworld or a maximum security research facility." Vila studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "There will be a full investigation. In the meantime, your classes are suspended pending review by the Board of Regents." Selene felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. Academic suspension could easily become permanent dismissal if the board decided she had somehow been responsible for the incident. Years of research, of building her reputation as an expert in Deathworld biology, could evaporate in an instant. "Headmistress, I need to be part of the investigation," she said firmly. "Whatever brought that creature here, my expertise could be crucial to understanding how and why." "Your expertise nearly got your entire class killed," Vela replied sharply, "if you hadn't recognized the thermal vulnerabilities of a juvenile specimen." "Bill, but I did recognize them," Celine interrupted. "And that knowledge saved lives today. Whatever is happening, you need someone who understands these organisms at a fundamental level." Before Vela could respond, Varun approached hesitantly, his blue skin pale with shock, but his eyes clear and determined. "Headmistress," he said, "I believe I may have information relevant to how the Tyrannonian entered our facility." Vela raised an eyebrow. "And you are?" "Varun Kadri, exchange student from the Arcturian Science Academy. I'm specializing in biosensor engineering," he explained. "For the past 3 weeks, I've been noticing anomalies in the environmental monitoring systems throughout this section of the station. Brief sensor blackouts, unexplained thermal fluctuations. I reported them to maintenance, but they were dismissed as calibration issues with the new system upgrades." "You think these anomalies were caused by the Tyrannonian?" Celine asked. Varun nodded. "It's consistent with the thermal masking abilities you described in your lectures. Dr. Maris, if the creature has been hiding within the station for weeks, moving through maintenance ducts and utilizing its camouflage abilities." Vela's expression darkened. "That would suggest a significant security breach, possibly intentional smuggling of a prohibited organism, or something worse," Celine said quietly. "Tyrannonians are intelligent enough to learn from observation. If this juvenile has been watching us, learning our patterns and technologies..." The implication hung in the air. A Deathworld predator loose on the station was frightening enough. The idea that it might have been deliberately studying them was terrifying. "I need access to the specimen," Celine said with sudden urgency, "and to all security logs and environmental data from the past month." Vela hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and pragmatism. "Headmistress," Rajak said, joining them after overseeing the evacuation of the last students. "Preliminary scans of the creature show evidence of artificial augmentation. This wasn't a natural specimen. Someone modified it." The revelation sent a chill through the room. Artificially enhanced Deathworld organisms fell under military restriction protocols. Such technology was classified as a potential bioweapon. Vela's professional composure cracked slightly, revealing genuine alarm. "Lock down the entire academy. No one enters or leaves until we understand exactly what we're dealing with." She turned to Celine. "Dr. Maris, you have provisional authority to examine the specimen under maximum security protocols. Lieutenant Rajak will coordinate with you." "I'd like to request Varun's assistance as well," Celine said, nodding toward the Arcturian student. "His sensor expertise could be valuable." Vela nodded curtly before striding away to coordinate the station-wide security response, leaving Selina, Rajak, and Varun standing amid the wreckage of what had been an ordinary classroom just an hour before. Selene looked at the containment pod where the Tyrannonian now lay in suspended animation, then at the holographic model still rotating above her podium, theory and deadly reality side by side. "Well," she said with a grim smile, "I've always believed in practical demonstrations, but this might have been excessive even for me." "Doctor," Rajak said, not sharing her attempt at humor, "if this creature was modified and deliberately introduced to the Academy, we could be looking at bioterrorism. Or industrial espionage," Varun suggested. "The Academy's research on Deathworld adaptations has significant applications for extreme environment technologies. Many corporations would pay handsomely for that data." Celine shook her head. "We're missing something." If someone wanted to steal research, there are simpler methods than releasing a lethal predator. She approached the containment pod, studying the creature through the transparent section. No, this was a test. They wanted to see how the organism would perform in this environment, how it would adapt to our technology. A field test? Rajak asked. But why here? Because we're the experts. Selene realized, what better way to test your enhanced Deathworld weapon than against the foremost xenobiologists in known space? If it could survive and hunt successfully here, it could succeed anywhere. And we passed the test by stopping it, Varun added, understanding dawning on his face. Exactly. Selene said. Someone was watching how we would respond, what countermeasures we would develop, and now they have that data. Rajak's hand moved to his communication device. I need to alert Headmistress Vela immediately. If you're right, the entire incident could have been monitored by whoever is behind this. As Rajak stepped away to make his report, Selena continued studying the contained Tyrannonian. Despite the danger, despite the violation of her classroom and the threat to her students, she couldn't help but admire the creature's perfect adaptation, even artificially enhanced. It remained a marvel of evolutionary design, a testament to the incredible crucible of Deathworld environments. Dr. Maris, Varun said hesitantly, is it strange that I found this exhilarating? Despite the danger, watching you apply theoretical knowledge to overcome a real Deathworld predator was the most valuable lesson I've ever experienced. Selene turned to him with a surprised smile. Not strange at all. In fact, it's exactly how I felt during my first field expedition to a marginal Deathworld. Theory becomes so much more meaningful when tested against reality. She glanced around the destroyed lecture hall, at the scattered equipment and damaged seating. Though perhaps next time, we could arrange a slightly more controlled practical demonstration. 3 weeks later, Selene stood before a very different class. The students were fewer. Some had transferred to other courses after the trauma of the Tyrannonian incident, but those who remained showed a new intensity, a deeper engagement with the material. Lecture Hall 12B had been completely redesigned. The traditional classroom configuration had been replaced by a circular arrangement with reinforced safety barriers between sections. Advanced environmental controls lined the walls, and a new containment system formed a transparent dome over the central demonstration area. Welcome to Advanced Practical Deathworld Biology, Selene announced, unable to keep a note of pride from her voice. The first course of its kind in any academic institution. Behind her, Headmistress Vela stood with several members of the Academy's Board of Regents, their expressions ranging from cautious approval to lingering skepticism. The investigation into the Tyrannonian incident was ongoing, but preliminary findings had vindicated Selene's suspicions. Evidence of external monitoring had been discovered, though the perpetrators remained unidentified. Rather than shutting down Selene's research, the Academy had made a bold decision to transform the security breach into an educational opportunity. The new program would combine theoretical study with carefully controlled practical demonstrations using secure specimens and advanced containment technology. Today, we begin with a comprehensive analysis of what occurred in this very room 3 weeks ago. Selene continued. The juvenile Tyrannonian specimen, which remains in maximum security containment, provided valuable data on how these organisms interact with our technology and environment. She activated the new holographic system, and a perfect recreation of the incident appeared in the central demonstration area. The creature's initial camouflage, its movement patterns, its responses to their countermeasures. What you're seeing is a composite recreation from security footage and sensor data. Pay particular attention to the thermal masking patterns here. She indicated a shifting color pattern overlaid on the hologram, and the chromatophore response to environmental stimuli here. The students leaned forward, studying the display with intense concentration. Varun, now promoted to teaching assistant for the course, moved among them, pointing out details and answering questions. The artificial modifications to the specimen were primarily focused on enhancing its sensory capabilities and environmental adaptability. Selene explained. Someone wanted to create a Deathworld predator capable of functioning in artificial habitats like stations and ships. The implications for security throughout settled space are significant. As she guided the class through the analysis, Selena felt a complex mixture of emotions. The incident had been terrifying, potentially catastrophic. Yet it had also validated everything she had been teaching about Deathworld organisms and their remarkable adaptations. More importantly, it had transformed theoretical knowledge into practical application in a way no traditional curriculum could have achieved. After class, as the students filed out engaged in animated discussion, Headmistress Vila approached her. "The board is impressed with the new program," she said. Her formal tone softened slightly. "Your quick thinking during the incident has earned you considerable goodwill. They've approved your proposal for the Advanced Xenobiology Research Center." Selena felt a surge of excitement. The research center had been her dream for years, a facility dedicated to studying the most extreme biological adaptations the galaxy had to offer, with applications ranging from medicine to environmental engineering. "Thank you, Headmistress. I won't disappoint you." "See that you don't," Vela replied, a hint of her old sternness returning. "Remember that your first responsibility is to your students' safety, not your scientific curiosity." "I understand," Selene said solemnly, "but I also believe that what happened here, as dangerous as it was, taught us all something valuable. Deathworlds aren't just distant threats to be studied through sensors and probes. The adaptations they produce can appear anywhere, even in the supposed safety of our most secure facilities." "A lesson learned at considerable cost," Vila noted. "The psychologists are still working with some of your former students." Selene nodded, accepting the rebuke. "A cost I take very seriously, which is why this new program is so important. We need to understand these organisms at a fundamental level, not just their biology, but how they interact with our technology, our environments, our security systems." "And the next time a Deathworld monster appears in your classroom?" Vila asked with the faintest suggestion of dry humor. Selene glanced at the new containment systems surrounding them, the reinforced barriers, the emergency protocols now built into every aspect of the lecture hall. "Next time," she said with quiet confidence, "we'll be ready for it." As Vila departed, Selene remained in the empty classroom, contemplating the holographic recreation still rotating in the demonstration area. The Tyrannonian's frozen form, caught in mid-lunge, seemed almost to be watching her with its multifaceted sensory organs. Someone had sent this creature to test them, to learn from their responses. The investigation might never identify the responsible parties, corporate interests, military factions, or something else entirely. But whoever they were, they had inadvertently given Selene something precious, a new way of teaching, a new approach to understanding the most extreme biological adaptations in the galaxy. In the vastness of space, with countless worlds harboring countless dangers, knowledge remained the most powerful tool for survival. And now, thanks to an uninvited visitor from a Deathworld, that knowledge would be tempered by practical experience, theory and reality combined into something stronger than either alone. Selene smiled as she shut down the hologram, already planning tomorrow's lesson. The Tyrannonian incident would become legend at the Academy, the day they taught a class about Deathworld monsters, unaware one was in the room. But it would be more than just a story. It would be the foundation of a new understanding, a new respect for the incredible adaptations life could develop under the most extreme conditions. And perhaps, someday, it would save lives far beyond the academic confines of the Interstellar Academy of Exobiology. After all, as she often reminded her students, in the study of Deathworlds, theory was just the beginning. Reality, with all its dangers and wonders, was the true teacher.